Contraception and the whole question of contraception played a pivotal role both in my leaving the church as a teenager and my coming back in my early 20s. And I think the pivot is, what is our understanding of happiness and freedom? And the culture promotes sexual freedom all the time, right? I mean, it talks a big line about sexual freedom. But what does the culture mean by sexual freedom? It means do whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, with whomever you want, without ever saying no. I bought into that kind of freedom. I remember tossing off what I considered the oppressive shackles of my Catholic upbringing as a teenager so I could indulge my compulsions whenever I wanted. And let's be honest, it felt liberating for a time. Same thing with my metaphor about the starvation and the fast food. If you've been starving and you eat the chicken nuggets, they taste good going down, but it's the after effect. You know, I did have this kind of question in my heart when I was indulging my compulsions, right? That am I really loving this person or am I using this person? If we have an understanding of sexual freedom as the indulging of our compulsions, then contraception is a prerequisite to that kind of freedom, because you want to do that without consequence, right? So you need contraception in that sense to be free. But are we really free when we are indulging our compulsions? I learned in studying what the Catholic Church really upholds about sexual freedom and human freedom in general, that freedom is not the liberty to indulge your compulsions. Rather, it's liberation from the compulsion to indulge. Because only such a person is truly free to be a gift. So I have asked hundreds of thousands of women this question around the world when I do my presentations. I'll say, how many of you would like to be married to a man or dating a man who cannot say no to his sexual desires? Never has a hand gone up. Why? What do the women here intuit about true sexual freedom? They know that if a man can't say no to his sexual desires, his yes means nothing. And she's just an outlet for him to indulge an uncontrollable urge. No, sexual freedom is not the liberty to indulge our compulsions. It's liberation from the compulsion to indulge. Only such a person is free to be a gift. Now, back to my story, I'll never forget when I realized what I thought was sexual freedom was sexual slavery. I did a little experiment with my girlfriend once. This was when I was a late teenager, and I said, I think we should give up sex for a time. And we tried, and I couldn't last more than like 3 days. And I realized I was not free. I was in chains because I couldn't say no. What I was calling freedom was actually more like sexual addiction. Is a person who can't say no to the urge to drink booze, is this person free or is this person in chains? Take a deeper look at what our culture promotes as sexual freedom. It's really sexual addiction and rendering our genitals unable to generate. In other words, so we can indulge our compulsions without any consequence. That's a prerequisite to that false idea of freedom. But if we have an authentic understanding of sexual freedom, as in I'm in control of my desires, therefore I don't need to control others to gratify them. This is another very important point. I learned it the hard way. If you are not in control of your sexual desires, you will inevitably seek to control others, to gratify them, and then you'll call that love. See, contraception is necessary to that understanding of freedom. And this is why I left the church. I thought the Catholic Church's teaching on contraception and the whole sexual ethic was absolutely ridiculous. I thought it was like denying people any other kind of modern convenience, like toothpaste or toilet paper. What is the point of denying a modern convenience, right? But I'll tell you, I remember very clearly, I went to this would be 1992, I went to an Easter vigil where a friend of mine was coming into the Catholic Church. And he stood up there and he said, I believe and profess everything the Catholic Church believes and professes. And he was received into communion in the church, and then he received communion in the church, Holy Communion. I didn't go to Holy Communion that night because I realized I was not in communion with the church. on this question. At this point, I had come to, because I lived the fallout, I experienced the pain, I had accepted that I should save sex for marriage at this point. But I was still wrestling with this contraception issue. And I started to visit people I trusted, people I thought were living the faith. Can you tell me, I went to a priest, can you tell me why the church teaches contraception is wrong? Oh, there's a future pope who's going to change the teaching. You don't have to worry about that. I went to another couple who I thought they had a lot of kids. I thought they're probably living the church's teaching. Oh no, the pastor told us Bill could get a vasectomy. It was okay to follow our own conscience here. And I was like, can anybody tell me why the church teaches this? Because if there's a reason, I want to know. And it was in this time period I discovered a book called Catholic Sexual Ethics by Dr. Bill May. And this would be a teacher, a theologian I'd actually end up having in the classroom. And he was the first one to demonstrate to me that contraception changes the very nature of the sexual act from loving a person to using a person. Now, sexual pleasure is a great gift from God, and we need to rejoice in that gift properly understood and lived. But as soon as you remove fertility from the sexual equation, the goal is no longer starting a family. The goal is no longer serving the next generation. The goal is pleasure. And when pleasure is the goal, what do other human beings become? They become means for our pleasure. This had been my root question. What is it in us as human beings that can lead us to treat other human beings as simply objects for our pleasure? Why do we spay and neuter our dogs and cats? Why don't we just ask them to abstain, right? Because they're not free. They're not free. When we render ourselves infertile, when we spay and neuter ourselves, aren't we reducing ourselves to the level of Fido and Fidette in heat? Animals who can't control themselves? What is at stake here is much, much more significant than we ever realize. What is at stake is the very nature of love, the very nature of freedom, the very nature of what it means to be a human being.